Yes, good to go, Chairman.
Yeah, thank you, Tony. Right, welcome back, anybody that's looking, and also members. We now return to the planning agenda, and the next application is in Braunston.
Thanks, Chairman. I don't want to correct you, but I will do. Strictly speaking, it's not technically in Braunston, although it shares a boundary with Braunston Parish. It actually falls within Abbey North. So sorry about that, but that's just the purpose of clarification. Just for your benefit, I think the boundary with the parish of Braunston runs down the length of the line of the application site. Unusually, this is a very narrow application site because it involves the construction of the latest phase of the cycleway link that has been a long-held objective of Daventry District Council to connect between Daventry Town Centre and Braunston to the northwest. Historically, it was always a desire, as it were, to follow the line of the old railway. But for various reasons, that's not been possible for this latest phase. But this proposal will, in effect, provide the next link across Farnborough Drive along the middle, what we call in the report as the Middlemore section, through the Copse section, and then through the agricultural field to stop short of the canal conservation area, which this is the canal track that basically allowed horses to be taken either side of the tunnel whilst the barges came through the tunnel. This is the western portal of the canal. As I say, the proposal is a long-held objective of the District Council to achieve that. So this is the latest application. Essentially, we've dealt with the application in three sections. Probably best if I actually go through the photographs rather than the drawings. But the proposal, as I say, the first section is what the report refers to as the Middlemore section, which will be leaving Farnborough Drive and using the existing path access that skirts the western half of the Middlemore estate. Along here is an existing track. It's sort of a hogging surface. The proposal is to widen this primarily along the Earthbound side, but there will be a requirement for some works along the residential side. And the reason for that is to try and protect what is a fairly soft edge to the residential estate, but also the need to maintain the stability of the Earthbound. So really along this area, there's no particular issues in terms of the principal of a track because it already exists. What's going to happen is this will be resurfaced up to 2.5 meters wide to provide access for really for all users, bicycles, etc., etc. The barriers that currently exist at the top end and the bottom end will be retained and used. So at the top end, we enter sort of what's called the pinch point, as referred to in the report, and we come out at what I refer to as the Copse end, which is quite a pleasant tree-lined area. There's a bit of undergrowth, but there's a number of mature or maturing trees that we as planners would be keen to retain in order to provide a sense of amenity in this area where the bridleway crosses the proposed path. This link has been discounted. And you'll see the report, we suggested that the Copse be revisited, and I'm happy to report that in liaison with the applicant, officers have agreed a way through this Copse area that retains as many of the trees as possible, proposes replacement planting, but also the stripping out of some undergrowth to provide a good line of sight for users of the path as they cut across this area. So the recommendation before committee was seeking delegated powers, and you'll see from the late reps, we're actually recommending that the application now be approved based on the latest sketch plan we received, but subject to those details being refined, shall we say, in a more detailed drawing. Leaving the Copse area, we enter then an agricultural field. And as I've said in the report, this initial stretch of the new path will involve the construction of a 3-metre wide cycle surface pathway with knee rail along the edge to provide an accessible surface that will be safe for potentially all users to access the wider canal network in due course. This initial bit is quite a high visibility. You can see pretty much the length of the proposed path for some distance, and in the context of open countryside, rural setting, etc., we judge that there will be some harm by the introduction of that particular type of feature. But the local topography for the remainder of the track is actually very beneficial, and it screens this construction from visibility across the wider landscape, such that its impact on the wider landscape is mitigated to quite a significant degree. And then the path stops short of the canal conservation area because that is not within the application site, that is within the remit of the Canal and Rivers Trust. And we understand that there has been positive dialogue. You'll see from the report there is positive sort of noises being made by the Canals and Rivers Trust to improving the towpath and the access track, but that's not yet currently possible. And you'll see, and for those who visit this area, the slope down to the canal towpath is heavily rutted, heavily eroded. It's not impossible to use, certainly for those on foot, but it would present a greater challenge for those with less mobility and perhaps even those on sort of wheelchairs or with prams, etc. Cyclists, mountain bikes may find it more of a better challenge, but the fact is that the steps down to the path, the barrier is currently down. There would be concerns and would require some improvements. But turning back to the application that's before members, we have to judge this application on its merits. And what we say, based on the development plan policies which support sort of alternative modes of transport, promote health and well-being, that the harm caused for some stretches of the path on the local open countryside are outweighed by the positive planning benefits, public benefits in terms of health, well-being, and promoting accessibility to the countryside. That said, you'll see that there are conditions on the site, on the application, to mitigate those concerns that I've identified. And with the additional conditions set out in the late representations, we're recommending the application be approved, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. I'm sure members are aware the only reason it's on this agenda is because it's one of their applications. Is Abbey North Councillor Dabbs or not? Tony?
No, it wouldn't be. Councillor Ritchie is one.
Yeah,
Chairman,
Right.
Councillor Ritchie and Councillor James.
Councillor Ritchie and Councillor James, right. Councillor James, you can go first.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, this footpath and cycleway has been an aspiration of Daventry District Council for a long time, and it has support, broad support from Braunstone Parish Council, and Daventry Town Council has no objection really in principle to this new way. It is only the first phase that we're considering tonight. There will be a second phase of this development at some time in the not too distant future, the strengthening of the towpath to take it all the way along the canal with possible improvements to that slope or some other means of providing a better access to continue along the whole route. But that will be in the second phase, and discussions are going on at this present time with the Canal and River Trust regarding that. But that, of course, is a separate matter. But as far as this particular way tonight is concerned, there will be mitigation in respect of the trees and the built-up entrance there. And I can't see any reason to refuse it on planning grounds. And so I'm more than happy to propose that we accept officer's advice on this application.
Thank you. Do you have a seconder? I'm
Thank
going
you.
to take Councillor Ritchie because he's another member of the ward. You wish to speak, Councillor Ritchie?
Yes, I'm very happy to second this. I support it. I wouldn't want support though to be confused with overwhelming happiness about it. I've got no problems about the fact that it is going through the countryside, because, you know, if you're going to see the countryside, you've got to have the means of getting there. And I think it's great. Cyclists already use this. The sort of cyclists that are prepared to go up the sorts of hills that you have coming up from the canal don't mind what sort of terrain they cycle over. But if it is a surface that, for example, people in wheelchairs or prams can make more use of, then that is absolutely great. Where my unhappiness lies is by the time you get to the top of the steps at the bottom, you know, what are people supposed to do then? I mean, that to me is the problem with this particular route that takes you down to the canal. And I feel that I don't equate this like building a canal that doesn't lead anywhere. But I feel there's sort of an element of that we're, you know, we're only, unless we're absolutely confident that this is going to lead to a properly connected path that will get over the hurdle of that difficult descent to the towpath and how we do with it. You know, I accept that people might need to get off their bikes, but that is something they're going to look at. I know that it's not a matter for this committee, and we've been through before. I don't understand why you just didn't put the route along that, across that little bit of field behind the Middlemore pub that takes you on to the existing track that leads all the way down the hill. That, you know, that is a hard surface. However, you haven't done that, and so my only option is to second this one.
Thank you. The next three speakers are Councillor Chandler, Councillor Wesley, and Councillor Dabbs, in that order. Councillor Chandler.
Thank you, Chairman. Eamon made several references to all users. I just wanted some confirmation that the restrictor barriers at either end would be negotiable in a wheelchair. How wide are they at the top?
Can you answer that quickly?
Again, Chairman, my understanding is the applicants intend to retain the existing restrictors. We have raised this with them in terms of compliance with accessibility standards. We are advised they're satisfied, they're fit for purpose. I personally have been through them. I would find it difficulty for them to be accessed by a wheelchair. That's my personal experience, but the applicants, as I say, have advised that they're intending to retain those barriers. Again, there's two issues here. One is restricting access to sort of unauthorized use by motorcycles, etc. I think that's what those existing barriers are intended to do. But my personal observation is you couldn't get a wheelchair through those particular barriers, and you may have to access the path via the bridleway at the top end to avoid it, or from the other end of the at the top end of Middlemore. As I say, that's the advice I've been given by the applicants.
Thank you. Councillor Wesley.
Thank you, Chair. I was going to raise the same issue. I've been on various cycling forums this week, and those type of barriers are very much frowned upon because they cause a distinct lack of accessibility, and they are not right for a cycle path. I mean, even wide even Tarzan may have a problem in getting through those, but
Gentlemen, ladies, I apologise.
yeah, I mean, those barriers are littered all around Daventry, and they're actually problematic to get through with a lot of bicycles with wide handles. They're really, in my view, they're not fit for purpose. And yes, you do want to stop motorbikes, but stopping motorbikes is a matter of enforcement, not impinging on other people's enjoyment. I think it's a real shame. I think if you've very, very tight at the top. Otherwise, I'm in full support of this application, and unlike Councillor Ritchie, I do think it's the right path down there. You can join up with the existing track at the bottom, and then go back to the 361. So it's not a route to nowhere. It actually gives you actually a nice route back up the hill, and then you can even you could probably cut across to the Middlemore pub anyway, because there's a worn path. So yeah, it's a good first stage. I think there's a lot of challenges in going down the canal, because you've also got across the marina parts, etc. So and get over the lock. So it's not a completely done deal, but it's a real start. I do have concerns about those barriers in terms of accessibility.
I think I had Councillor Dabbs next, didn't I?
Indeed,
Yeah,
Chair. Yes, indeed. If everybody's ready, I'll go. Thank you, Chair. I agree with what's been said about these barriers. I think that they are not friendly at all, and it will reduce the popularity, if you like, of the path if you make it difficult to use for certain members of the public, whatever their mode of transport might be, whether it's legal transport as in a bike or a wheelchair or pushchair, and you make it difficult. That's not really the purpose of the cycleway. Another major concern I have is the fact that it doesn't properly join up with the canal towpath. There seems to be concerns on the canal towpath as the condition of it, the width of it, the potential for flooding. I take all this from the report. I haven't actually seen it myself, but looking at those pictures, that is not easy terrain to work. And yes, the enthusiastic cyclist like Councillor Wesley can probably get up and down a slippery slope. Less able people will not be so sure or sure-footed, and therefore that's a concern. So I have major concerns about that. I expressed my major concerns at the council meeting that voted for this, but I think in terms of a planning meeting, there is very, very little that you can actually say against this plan in pure planning terms. I think there's an element on the tarmac surface is not in keeping with other surfaces, but on the other hand, a proper tarmac surface is probably going to require much less maintenance than a looser surface that would be prone to being dug up by the movement of feet and tires and so on. So yes, I can't give this my wholehearted endorsement, but I think in planning terms, it probably has to stand. And I think it's very sad that the connection at the Braunston end hasn't been developed and is not a done deal with the CRT, and there's absolutely no guarantee that it will be made. I think if it doesn't get made, that will be very, very unfortunate. If they can improve that Braunston end, yes, I think that probably would be a very pleasant cycle route for leisure needs. Whether or not commuters would use it, I don't know, but it would be great if it would join up. So I have concerns that it doesn't, but in planning terms, it has to pass, I'm sure. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Dabbs. Councillor Harris next, followed by Councillor Smith.
I think Councillor Smith might have been before me, Chair.
Okay, well, the squares keep altering. Okay, thank you, Councillor Harris. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, barriers were my concern, but that's been pretty much, I think everybody's well aware of that now. But just on the reference your telephone call, will you confirm you'll be paying £10 to the chairman's charity?
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Chair, shall I?
I wouldn't have let him speak if I'd have known that. Councillor Harris, don't do that again.
Sorry, I'll be brief. I just echo really some of the comments that are made already. I think accessibility is really important for a pathway of this nature. You would have heard Councillor Irving Swift and myself, and probably Councillor Parker, extolled the virtues of our Brampton Valley Way many times. And, you know, we don't really have any major obstacles or barriers to accessibility. And so far as I'm aware, we don't really have any major problems with, you know, motorcyclists or anything of that nature. I'm sure people do access it and it goes on, but it's not really something that you hear people complaining about. So I think that should be factored in to make sure it is accessible. I guess I echo the second point, which is connectivity is really important. And I hope that the phase 2 works through, comes online, because that's really important. It is, I accept the point that you can come to the end of the road and you can find a different way. But I think these things work best when you can actually access and move all the way through. So again, no objection from me. I think it's a good first step. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, I'm going straight to the vote now. We have a proposal the application be approved, which has been seconded. All those in favour, please tell Marina in a second. Marina.
Councillor Chandler.
For.
Councillor Cribbin.
For.
Councillor Dabbs.
Abstain.
Councillor Frost.
For.
Councillor Harris.
For.
Councillor Irving Swift.
For.
Councillor James.
For.
Councillor Matton.
For.
Councillor Parker.
For.
Councillor Ritchie.
For.
Councillor Smith.
For.
Councillor Wesley.
For.
That's 11 in favour, none against and 1 abstention, Chair.
Right, so the application is approved. We move on to Woodford Holt, Woodford Commemories rather. Give it by its proper name. Eamon, over to you.
Mr. Chairman, you see that screen?
Yep.
I think really by way of background, it's probably worth advising members that the site really comprises a number of large dwellings with very, very large gardens historically. And as you see from the history, planning permission was granted for a dwelling and a detached garage in this area, which was just within the confines of the identified the neighbourhood plan. But this remains as garden. So irrespective of the status of the confines of the village, you have a long established residential garden, which has simply been taken over by the dwelling that's been built to the rear. And this application really is an application to construct, we approve this, we remove permitted development rights. So this paraphernalia of small ancillary buildings wouldn't normally require planning permission for the vast majority, given the size of this plot, and could be built without planning permission. Because permitted development rights were removed, because the approved dwellings would just straddle the confines, it was really a case of removing PD rights in order for the council to be able to assess the impact of any ancillary development beyond the confines in terms of its impact on the open countryside. I just want to give members the comfort, we're not proposing a great big green pole here. That's simply indicating where the site is as viewed from surrounding areas. And you'll see from these photographs that it's fairly well screened, although it is an extensive garden projecting beyond the built form. And consequently, the proposed buildings themselves won't be readily visible beyond that. You know, they comprise fairly the usual sort of stuff you'd find in a garden, a greenhouse, a shed, and a gazebo. And accordingly, recommending the application be approved, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. No speakers, but we have a local member, don't we? Local member.
Thank you, Chairman. It's hard to go against what Eamon said, I suppose. I'm going to probably go with his advice, but I'm interested to hear what other people have got to say.
Thank you. All right. Who wishes to speak then? Oh, we have one hand. Councillor Irving Swift.
Sorry, Chairman, it seems that I speak to quite a lot. now those structure, they have wooden things and so on, and they're outside of the confine of the village. But how to put it? Could I have clarification from the officer that those structure do not change the nature of the garden they are in, so they don't change a bigger structure, because it's all wood and it's all quite innocuous. I do not want suddenly that we have another planning application and that would have been development via the back door, if the officer can understand what I mean. So are we guaranteed that those structure by their nature are ancillary and really just in wood and can disappear? Because I have no worry about the structure, but I have a worry that we change the designation of the land on which they are on.
Eamon?
In terms of planning.
I think the answer, Chairman, is that it's always been a garden. It's been a garden for a very long time, and until the new dwelling was built, I suspect that the previous occupants of the original dwelling could have covered it, half the garden, with outbuildings if they'd so chosen. We have taken the opportunity, as a result of the new application for the new dwelling, to remove PE rights to secure that level of control. And in this case, the gazebo, shed, and the other outbuilding are judged to be acceptable.
Yes, so in that case, I will propose to go with officer advice, please.
Okay, thank you. Do you have a seconder? I'll take Councillor Matten because he wants to speak anyway. So would you like to speak now, Councillor Matten?
No, I was actually going to formally propose that we go along with officer's advice. So that was
good.
excellent timing. And nothing more to add to what's already been said. Thank you.
Thank you.
I second the proposal.
Thank you. Do we have any more speakers, councillors? Okay.
No one indicated, Chairman.
We'll go straight to the vote then. Right, we have a proposal the application be approved, which has been seconded, as you've just heard. Can you please indicate to our very good friend Marina whether you support that or not? Over to you, Marina.
Okay. Councillor Chandler.
For.
Councillor Cribbin.
For.
Councillor Dabbs.
For.
Councillor Frost.
For.
Councillor Harris.
For.
Councillor Irving Swift.
For.
Councillor James.
For.
Councillor Matten.
For.
Councillor Parker.
For.
Councillor Ritchie.
For.
Councillor Smith.
For.
Councillor Wesley.
For.
Unanimous, Chair.
Thank you. The application is approved. Move on to Draughton, which is quite a few miles away. Catherine, over to you.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll just share my screen. So this is for a single-storey side extension and alteration to the existing access parking area for a property in Draughton. So if I just start my slideshow. So you can see it's on the corner with Lamport Road and the High Street. It's not readily, or there's no immediate neighbours, which you'll see by the photos. So this is where the new extension is going to be proposed. It has been extended over the past to include a two-storey extension, which you'll see with the photos. But what they're proposing to do is removing this garden shed and replacing it with a single-storey dining room and a boot room extension with a porch area. And as you can see, there's an alteration to the access driveway here. So as officers, we consider that the proposal will still be subservient to the main property, and it's considered that the development is acceptable. It will not have an impact on residential amenity or the street scene. So this is photos of the site. Therefore, the application is recommended for approval. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Again, no speakers. Local member is Tony.
Chairman, Councillor Parker and Councillor Harris.
All right. Right, Councillor Harris, you can go first this time.
Thank you, Chair. I have no objections to this. The Parish Council, I believe also Maidwell and Draughton Parish Council have no objections, and neighbours seem to be in support of it, and it looks a fairly sympathetic design. So I would suggest and propose that we go with officers' advice on this one.
Thank you. Do you have a seconder? Right, the other member, local member, wishes to second. So over to you for any comments, Kevin.
No, I think it's absolutely fine. I can see no reason to refuse it, and I would happily second it.
Right. Thank you. Councillor Matton, you've got a hand up. Is that to propose or second it?
No, it was neither. It was to ask the question why this wasn't approved under permitted development, because there are no objections.
Can you remind us, Catherine?
Yes, Chairman. The applicant is or knows of someone, or the owner, part owner of the site, is actually an employee of the council.
Okay, thank you.
Right, no other hands? No. Okay, we have a proposal the application be approved, which has been seconded. All those in favour, please tell Marina. Marina.
Councillor Chandler,
For.
Councillor Cribbin,
For.
Councillor Dabbs,
For.
Councillor Frost,
For.
Councillor Harris,
Or
Councillor Irving Swift,
For.
Councillor James,
Oh.
Councillor Matton,
For.
Councillor Parker,
For.
Councillor Ritchie,
For.
Councillor Smith,
For.
Councillor Wesley.
For.
Unanimous, Chair.
The application is approved. We're moving fast now. It's perhaps because we had that early break. Right, the next application is in Ardingworth, and it's Catherine to present it. And it's also say goodbye. So she won't hear anything from Councillor Irving Swift. She won't be taking part visually or audibly rather. Catherine.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, members may recall this site. It's had a checkered planning history. It's within the village of Ardingworth. It has got planning permission it got planning permission over appeal for a pair of semi-detached properties. Then an application came in for a single property of modern design. Again, that was allowed at appeal. So we're not here to talk about the principle of development. We're just here to talk what the changes are and whether they are so harmful that they actually need to be refused. Officers are recommending that this application is approved because the alterations are relatively minor and will not have an adverse impact on the character or appearance of Ardingworth. So if I go through the slides, so you can see there's been a slight change in position during the construction. However, it's considered, even though there's a slight change, it's roughly very much in the same footprint. It's been twisted by about 0.8 of a degree. So technically, yes, not in accordance, hence why this application is before members tonight. We've also received amended drawings to show additional landscaping here to protect the amenities to the property to the rear here, which was not included within sort of the original submission as well. So this is the proposal. So at the original proposal included this area here as a garage. Now there's a garage doors proposed here. They've got rid of those now and have got windows. It's now a proposed workshop and store. There's some other alterations to sort of the windows, such as which if I go to the this elevation, it shows clearly what the changes are. So there's been changes to these windows. Some of them are slightly bigger, some of them are slightly larger, or sort of and also the materials have been changed on the garage element. So this elevation here is no longer clad, but is now render. And you can see an additional proposed meter housing. Now you can see within the report that there are concerns about the meter housing. However, we consider that conditions can overcome those concerns by either them with additional landscaping. Concerns have been raised about the brick wall. This is a proposed perspective, which gave an idea of a new brick wall along here. That's not being proposed now, but what they are doing and proposing is a hedge in this location. So it still gives that criteria, and you see by the photos, there's an existing hedge next door, so it would continue that hedgerow along that area. So I'm not going to go into too much detail, sort of apart from that we consider with the distances between the properties, which are over 30 meters, especially to this area, and also the boundary to the back, consider the alterations are acceptable and do not have an adverse impact either on the existing amenities of the residents or the character and appearance of the street scene, as well as nearby listed building. So you can see this is through the photos, this is the view looking back up from the street to the property. Yes, you note that these alterations have been undertaken already because the property's in pretty much in the complete state. However, just because they have carried out the works does not mean we should refuse the application. Planning is very much permissive. That's hence why you're allowed to vary conditions either through Section 73 applications or through non-material amendments. So overall, we've got to consider the impacts, and as officers, we consider the impacts are fine and recommended the application for approval. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Catherine. We have 3 speakers. First speaker, Mr. Kennedy, who's against the application. Mr. Kennedy, you have 3 minutes, sir.
Good evening. I'm speaking tonight to object to the application on behalf of local residents. Recognising the deep concerns of the Parish Council and local residents, this committee refused the original planning application for this site, but it was subsequently allowed to appeal. Local residents accepted this decision, acknowledging that the correct procedure had been followed and all avenues to let our feelings had been exhausted. Despite this, the applicants are now applying to release themselves of the obligation to complete the development in line with the plans approved by the planning inspector, which included compromises to lessen the impact of the overtly modernist design of this property on the local community. Firstly, I concur with the Parish Council regarding their objections to the meter housing and focus on 3 other key concerns of local residents. 1, removal of the brick wall to front. In point 6.13 of their appeal statement, the applicant argued that a brick wall would mitigate the harm caused by the modern design by partially concealing the development, matching the brick wall opposite, thus creating a relationship with the surrounding properties and ensuring the development is not dominant on the street scene. Omission of the brick wall means that the development is even more visible to and different from surrounding properties, in particular the listed Bosworth House. It also means that the meter housing, parked cars, and part of the frontage will now be visible from the street scene, thus detracting from the rural style of the lane. Therefore, the brick wall should be maintained. 2, conversion of garage to habitable room. Objectors were assured by both the applicant and the planning inspector in his report that parking spaces plus a garage would provide sufficient off-road parking, recognising the limited availability of parking on the narrow lane. Changing the garage to a habitable room has the dual effect of not only removing space for parking, but significantly increasing the living area of the property, making this a larger development than originally envisaged and approved. Therefore, the garage should be maintained. I would also ask that the cladding on the west side of the garage is reinstated to ensure it blends into its immediate environment. 3, change to landscaping. In the applicant's appeal statement, they confirm their intention to plant semi-mature trees around 15 foot to the south of the development to provide additional screening to the south. Recognising such action was required to prevent harm arising from the development. The south face of the property is largely glass, and so this landscaping must be maintained to ensure the privacy and amenity of surrounding residents. I would also ask the committee to remind the applicant of their obligation to create a second dedicated parking space in front of the cottage, as no development has yet commenced in this aspect. In conclusion, these amendments significantly alter the development which was approved at appeal and do away with important points aimed at mitigating the effects of the development. If the application were to be approved, it would harm the immediate street scene, detract from the amenity and privacy of neighbouring properties, create a larger development than originally envisaged, and would mean the property does not blend easily into its surroundings. This would be contrary to policy EV10 and RA3 of the Settlement and Countryside Local Plan, as well as policy S10 of the West Northants Joint Core Strategy. So I respectfully ask the committee to refuse the application and ensure this development is built in line with the plans approved at appeal. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Second speaker, Leslie Richardson, Parish Council.
I think that's Leslie Sanderson, actually, but I'm the Vice Chair of the Parish Council.
I do apologise.
That's all right, don't worry.
My eyesight's not that good.
This application is confusion of retrospective applications and breaches of conditions leading to major amendments to the original permitted plans. This application is headed Variation of Condition 2 of Planning Permission DA 2018-0282. This condition states, the development shall be carried out in accordance with the approved plans. Permission for the original application was only given on appeal, with ample time to ensure the plans were correct. Therefore, it's very hard to understand why there are so many variations, now largely retrospective, and why they were not incorporated into the original plans. The Parish Council has submitted objections to these variations and respectfully asked the Planning Committee to consider them individually. The Parish Council is very unhappy to find so many retrospective variations with no apparent justification, but in particular importance are the following. Omission of the brick wall to the front garden. The Parish Council object very strongly to the omission of the brick wall. This important feature has already been highlighted in the applicant's appeal statement to partly conceal the property, to match the brick wall opposite, to ensure the house would not be dominant on the street scene. The original application was refused permission by the Planning Authority for the following reason. The design of the proposed development would appear incongruous with the surrounding area and would be out of character with the local village environment and would not sit comfortably within the immediate street scene. The evidence to retain the brick wall as originally planned seems overwhelming. The Parish Council requests that the omission of the brick wall is refused and the wall retained in perpetuity. Change from garage to store and workshop, which required garage door to be admitted and changed to window. The garage door must be retained as in the original plans. If there is a requirement for a store and workshop, it has been wondered why this wasn't incorporated in the original plans and why we're having to consider a retrospective application. The plot is very small with little room for additional parking. The lane is single track with no room for parking or turning. It is essential the garage be retained and used as a garage to ensure there is adequate parking on site. Change to the garden layout. It must be ensured that there is adequate screening obtained by planting semi-mature trees as in the original plans. Construction of external meter housing. This is an unattractive feature which must be hidden within the site and not visible from the road. The Parish Council feels very strongly that these retrospective variations are unacceptable and will have a major impact on the settling of the dwelling. There are 8
3 minutes, Chair.
There are 8 variations hidden under one application. The Parish Council asks that each variation is considered as a separate item and objections taken into consideration. Alternatively, the Parish Council asks the Planning Committee to dismiss this application and that the separate application has been submitted for each item, which would lead to a more acceptable method of decision making.
Can you now finish, please?
I've finished.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Right, the third speaker is Mr. Richards, who's for the application.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm a planning barrister instructed to speak on behalf of the applicant. This application seeks minor revisions to the details approved by an existing planning permission. The principle of constructing a dwelling of this size, architectural style and form on this plot is already established. That is the baseline for your decision tonight. You have to ask yourselves, are these changes from what is currently approved harmful and unacceptable to the neighbours and the village in planning terms? There have been 2 successful appeals on this site already. The last time to approve the dwelling it's now sought to vary. If it has to go to a 3rd appeal, I regret to say that there will be a costs application against the council in respect of the applicant's legal and other professional fees, which will be substantial. The parish council's objection and its use of language, as set out in the report, shows a failure by a handful of influential parishioners and parish councillors to accept the appeal inspector's judgment about the modern design of the building. They are still fighting battles they have already lost. For example, it cannot possibly be said that the building being sited marginally differently, 40 centimetres to the east and a rotation of less than 1 degree, is a, quote, blatantly flagrant, unquote, departure from the approved plan. The difference takes it further away from the nearest neighbour. The loss of the garage has no effect at all on the adequacy of off-street parking available. The Highway Authority's view is that the parking will still be in excess of the standard requirements for the property. It is frankly absurd to suggest that the replacement of a boundary wall with a hedge is offensive in planning terms. We think that a solid wall will be a worse solution for residents, delivery drivers, and the weekly refuse lorry. There is already an existing boundary hedge along the adjacent property. There will be no adverse impact on the amenity of neighbours from the minor changes to the windows. The nearest neighbour does not object. The omission of the dark cladding was done after the closest neighbour stated a preference for a white wall. The meter box was placed where it is by Western Power to comply with regulations concerning this type of building construction. I'm sorry to say that this has got personal, petty, and out of hand, and it has got to stop, allowing everybody to move on. Mr. Chairman, on the other hand, I am happy to say this site is not in the open countryside. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Local member won't be able to speak. So, members, I need some hands.
Chairman, you've got Councillor Auger on the meeting as a ward member.
Oh, I beg your pardon. Councillor Auger, well, I do indeed. I do apologise. How could I miss you? You must be muted. What's wrong, Tony? Why isn't he responding?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now, Councillor Auger.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
I didn't intend to speak, and I only came to listen to the proceedings this evening. So I'm happy to hear other councillors' view on this issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, I'm taking the. Which hand went up first, Tony?
You've got Councillor Ritchie, Councillor Wesley, Councillor James, Councillor Parker, Councillor Dabbs, in that order, Chairman.
Right, well, that's slightly different order to my screen, but I'll try and keep to it. Councillor Ritchie first.
Really, just to say, I think that a hedge would be very much nicer than a wall. And I can't imagine that a nice house is going to be less nice by some of the things that have been proposed.
Thank you, Councillor Ritchie. Well, apparently, Councillor Wesley, you're next.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I mean, from memory, I think I voted for this originally. I still see a little problem with it. I mean, the changes, just going through it, the changes appear really, really minor. You know, maybe the meter housing, but changing windows, wall for a hedge, you know, really we're talking about nothing here in actual fact. I think it's really, really disappointing that we're nitpicking around the edges. It would just seem, I can understand that people might be annoyed by this original development, but the fact remains it was given permission, and legitimately so. And you know, during construction, it gets moved by a few centimeters. It gets slightly twisted by a degree. A few alterations to the windows. I honestly don't see it, and I really, really think that we should accept this and go with officer's advice on it. So that's me.
Is that a proposal or not?
I will propose that, yeah.
Right, do you have a seconder?
Councillor Chandler, Chairman.
Councillor Chandler. Wish to speak, Councillor Chandler?
There's nothing more needs to be said, Chairman. I'm quite happy to second the proposal that we approve this application.
Thank you. Councillor James.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. If I remember right, this last time, I'm not sure whether I voted against it or not, but I certainly criticised that type of modernist house being built in this location. And I still think it's a folly from a value point of view, but that's not my decision and nothing to do with me. But anyway, as has been said, the principle of the development's established, the house is almost complete, as it were. These amendments are very minor, and I do agree with what Councillor Ritchie said, that a hedge is much more preferable than a wall because it softens it, as also is the replacement of a start garage door. And I've got a good example of that down not far from me, which also is replaced by a softer window. And it doesn't overlook anybody because it faces frontwards. So, you know, I'm quite happy with this one as it is. I wish it had never been built like that. I would have preferred a different type of house. But there we are. We are where we are. And these are minor amendments, and it'd be very difficult to refuse these. So I'll go with officer's advice.
Thank you. Councillor Dabbs.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think I echo in some respects what Councillor James has said. I think it's an absolutely awful design. I think it makes the previous Aldi proposal that we got look quite acceptable. And I'm sure this will be one of those houses where people will walk past at some stage in the future and say, how on earth did they approve that for planning? But there we go. That's not the question. I think at the end of the day, I don't have any big issues with this. I don't like that meter box. I think it could be smaller. I don't know whether it has to be those dimensions. If it could be smaller and it could go in the conditions that it could be looked at in being reduced in size, I think that would make me a little bit happier. But I think at the end of the day, having a big meter box outside the ugly building is going to make no difference to its siting and how it fits in. So I think at the end of the day, we have to approve this. Don't like it, but we're going to have to live with it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Parker.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, just a few things. I think I'd probably go along with the first two speakers, actually. The reason is on the schedule of conditions. So this is from the inspector. So on the basis that we'll agree with the inspector and not with other people. No external windows, doors or roof mounted fitments other than those authorised by this permission shall be constructed without prior consent of the local planning authority. Well, plainly, that's not the case on any of this. Everything has been built out already. And I see the applicant obviously doesn't want to listen to what the inspector said. He wanted actually the brick wall originally. Now he doesn't want a brick wall. I don't understand that because I think the brick wall would hide that lovely building or house. So I just don't understand why there's been a 180-degree switch there between the two. Somebody mentioned the space, I think next door, because I think they were going to put something down there. I'd like to see that in black and white. So I'm against it on the basis that what an inspector said, and then what was carried out, which was contrary to that, and then to come back and say, well, these are the alterations, we want to actually regularise it. I just don't go along with that approach. And I don't go along with the approach from Mr. Richards either, when he says we could be in for a lot of money if we turn it down. I don't like that at all. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Kevin. Councillor Parker, rather. Right, any more speakers?
Councillor Harris.
No more. Councillor Harris. Oh, the hand has gone white. That's why I can't see you.
It is, yes, it blends in too well. Chair, I'll be brief. I concur with some of the points that have been made earlier on, but I think on balance, and this isn't an on balance issue here, that I agree with the hedge point. I think that is actually will soften it and actually will be better for the environment potentially also. Ardingworth itself is a lovely village. It has lots of different mixed styles of houses in Ardingworth, all different shapes and sizes. And I think that, this has been approved. It has been built. Yes, there are some tweaks or changes that have taken place. And I take the point that Councillor Parker makes that should have perhaps been consulted on. But overall, I don't think they're that major. The point about design is an interesting one. Some of the boldest designs many years later are the ones that often end up getting listed and become perhaps people take a deep breath of awe in as they walk past. So I think that's one of subjectivity. And, I don't think we should be commenting on that design and whether it fits or whether it doesn't, because that's history. Planning was approved for that. So I don't think I can do anything other than go with officer's advice on this one. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Right, with no more speakers, I will go to the vote. We have a proposal that the application be approved as per officer's advice, which has been seconded. All those in favour, please tell Marina. Marina, over to you.
Okay. Councillor Chandler.
For.
Councillor Cribbin.
For.
Councillor Dabbs.
For.
Councillor Frost.
Against.
Councillor Harris.
For.
Councillor Irving Swift. Oh, gone. Councillor James. Councillor Matton.
For.
Councillor Parker.
Against.
Councillor Ritchie.
For.
Councillor Smith.
Against.
Councillor Wesley.
For.
Yep. 8 in favour, 3 against, Chair.
The application is approved. Right, can you get Councillor Irving Swift back in, Tony?
Yes, Chairman, she's now back in the room.
Right, thank you. That finishes the applications. We now go to a report. Now, before we start the debate or potential debate on this, I would like correct language used. I don't want to hear anything that's offensive. If anybody says anything that's offensive, they'll be muted. If anybody uses bad language for any reason whatsoever, they'll be muted and not come in again. I want a proper debate as per normal. Over to you, Officer.
Thanks, Chairman. I'll just try and share the screen. Can members see that screen?
Yep.
Okay. Where to start? I'll start with the first thing, which is that there is a typo on this report. It should be the Executive Director of Resources rather than the Executive Director of Community, and I do apologise for that, Tony. I've been asked to produce this report really by way of an update for members because there seems to be concerns that there is lack of action by officers and formal action to address breaches of planning control. And this report really sets out officers' current thinking on the situation and provides some background in terms of the planning history for the site, but also background in terms of the planning regime in which we all operate. And officers share frustrations, but just like everybody else, that people from time to time will breach the planning system. We don't condone willful breaches of the planning system, but the planning system is about managing the development of land. It's a permissive regime, and therefore any enforcement that operates within that regime has to regard to the fact that overall it is a permissive regime. That doesn't mean that each and every breach of planning control should be sanctioned, but equally it doesn't mean that each and every breach of planning control should automatically carry with it a requirement to carry out enforcement action automatically. There's a process of negotiation, there's a process of engagement, and the government expects that, and the government guidance on enforcement expects that when breaches of planning control are brought to our attention. So really, you'll see the first part of the report provides you with that background in terms of setting out what a breach of planning control is. But it also then goes on to advise that there is a requirement to approach breaches of planning control enforcement in a proportionate manner, but also to engage as early as possible with owners and occupiers in order to negotiate or resolve any breaches. And clearly there comes a point where if a breach is so serious it cannot be resolved, then that is a point at which councils have to consider whether or not formal action is necessary. But in doing that and moving along that road, we have to have regard to the provisions of the development plan and the fact that fundamentally there is a presumption in favour of sustainable development, and that planning policy and adopted planning policy documents also set that presumption, obviously within limits. So I don't mean to produce this report and say we are not taking any action. The fact is that we are and have been engaging with the occupants of this site for quite a long time, and there is a recognition that there are breaches of planning control, and they are looking to engage with those. So it would be unfair to say that the occupants of this site have willfully sought to disengage from the planning process, and it is a matter of fact that they sought to engage with the local planning authority to discharge conditions prior to occupation of the site. But one of those conditions in respect of the access couldn't be agreed because of technical reasons with Highways England pertaining to a Section 278 agreement, which relates to highways legislation, not planning legislation. So it's really by way of that background. What I will do within the report, it obviously goes on to talk about where there are technical breaches of planning control 4.7. We don't condone it, but it's a case of judging whether or not there are trivial or technical breaches which cause no material harm or adverse impact on the immunity of the site of the surrounding area, or whether or not, even though there's a breach, looking at the development itself, and we have had many, many occasions at Daventry with retrospective applications where members have, understandably, are very frustrated, and the previous application is an example, that people appear to be in some people's minds, abusing the system, when in actual fact, what's simply happening is that they are on site. They're looking to change things for whatever reasons, multiple reasons. But the fact is that there has been changes. You must sort of set that aside because it's retrospective and deal with it as if it was a fresh application. So you can have to consider whether the development itself is acceptable, even though there's a breach, or whether or not a local planning authority considers that an application would regularize the breach in planning terms by, again, the imposition of conditions. So really, by way of background, there is a system that we operate within, which is permissive. And to that end, I would probably argue that enforcement of that system is not one of punitive action up front automatically. It's one of looking at what has happened on site and looking to negotiate and try to regularize. And clearly, if those things are exhausted and no acceptable alternative or resolution can be found, then yes, if it's judged to be expedient, then enforcement action can be pursued where it's judged to be expedient. But even then, where enforcement notices are served, there is a right of appeal. And part of that appeal will be that the council needs then to demonstrate A, is planning permission required? Was there a breach of planning control? B, is it acceptable in planning terms? Much in the same way as a planning application. So it's not the end of it that by serving a formal enforcement notice that the matter somehow will be dismissed or gone away. So yes, I understand the frustrations of local communities of what they see to be abuses of the planning system. But as officers, we have to provide advice to you, having regard to the government advice and guidance on enforcement matters, and ultimately having regard to whether or not those breaches of planning control are so serious as to warrant formal action, punitive action, or remedial action to mitigate the planning harm that's being caused. I'm going to have a drink of water, and then I'll move on to the next parts of the report. So, as I said, the permission has been granted on the site for a traveller site. And yes, that permission was subject to a number of conditions restricting the number of units on site, restricting the size of some vehicles on site and commercial vehicles on site. And it also required the access to be improved prior to occupation of the site. And if we do with the last one first, the access has not been improved. As I suggested in the early part of my introduction, the applicants did seek to engage with the local planning authority. They formally submitted details of access arrangements to the site, but for reasons set out by Highways England, which to my mind were technical reasons that related to a 278 agreement, we couldn't discharge that condition. Again, I'm not going to go into the circumstances behind why the site was subsequently occupied, but it was occupied. There was a breach of the condition, and we engaged with the applicants to advise them of that. And in response, the applicants submitted an application to regularize that breach. That breach, that application which sought to regularize it, is a perfectly legitimate way of seeking to regularize breaches of planning control. Section 73, or whatever, no material amendments. They are means within the system of regularizing breaches of control by way of seeking to set out an approach that would be acceptable. That application, we were directed, could not be by the Secretary of State for Transport. We were directed not to determine that application because of the technical reasons cited by Highways England that pertained to the completion of the 278 agreement. We subsequently served a breach of condition notice because, as planning officers, we judged the access to be unacceptable. Those arrangements were unacceptable, but we had limitations in agreeing the technical details. So a breach of condition was served to secure improvements to the access, taking a form that was the subject of previous submissions in terms of the width, radii, etc. But we accepted that could not overcome the applicant's requirements to deal with Highways England in terms of the 278 agreement. So these photographs show the access arrangements as they previously were, and I think members would agree that those were unacceptable, and we as planning officers accepted that they were unacceptable, and the applicants accepted they were unacceptable. After serving of the breach of condition notice, we gave them 10 months to carry out the improvements, and they've carried out improvements to the access, which I will show here. So you have a much wider splay. It's a tar macadam surface, and it provides a smooth surface down into the site. I'm not saying that this area is technically up to 278 standards, but that is not within the remit of the local planning authority to agree. What the local planning authority can do was to serve a breach of condition notice, to require and give the applicant sufficient time to engage with Highways England. They've not done that, that is for them, but in planning terms, I would argue and contend that they have engaged with the planning authority to bring about improvements to the existing access arrangements to the site. And in that sense, they have complied largely with the provisions of the breach of condition notice. So in terms of the access arrangements, we are not recommending any further formal enforcement action. What we can do, and what we have done, is to engage with Highways England and advise them of the service of the breach of condition notice and brought it to their attention. If they deem it necessary under Highways regulations to pursue the applicant to ensure that this access arrangement is carried out in a form that meets their technical requirements, that is for the Highways England to pursue. But what I would come away from in terms of the planning issues is that the access into the site has been improved in a manner which satisfies certainly the requirements of the original planning approval to allow it to be used in planning terms to serve what was approved, a single unit. Now we'll move on to the number of units on site. And again, members will be aware that planning permission was given for the use of this site with a condition on limiting the number of units to one static, one mobile, and the day room. We have investigated complaints about additional units, and the applicants again accept that those additional units are not in accordance with the original approval. These are the additional units. These photographs and these two, they sit within the original application site, but they are in breach of that condition. The applicants contend that they are for the needs of the traveller family, and we have not challenged that because there are other circumstances that again go beyond the remit of the planning authority. But having regard to development plan, policies on travel units, etc., we have invited an application to regularise this. The applicants have, as of today, advised that they have engaged a planning consultant to pursue an application in respect of additional residential units. So based on that sort of development, we as officers will continue to engage with the planning consultant to secure an application as soon as we can to enable the planning merits of the proposals to be properly assessed and considered against development plan policy. So in that regard, we are not presently recommending any formal enforcement action in respect of the number of units on site, because acting within the planning regime, the applicants have sought, we've engaged with the applicants have engaged a planning consultant, and we are advised that an application will be submitted to deal with that matter. We will await, obviously, submission of that, and if necessary, appraise this committee, if we need to, of any progress on that matter. Turning to the next issue, as set out in the report, is the commercial activities, including the storage of vehicles on site, contrary to the conditions imposed. And again, the report considers that. I've been on the site on a number of occasions. I've witnessed numerous vehicles on site, some of which are owned by the applicant, some of which are parked on site by arrangement with the garage across the A5, and others, the applicant freely admits, yeah, he deals in the sale of vans, but when challenged to remove them, he has moved them on. He has advised that he will be acquiring new premises in which to conduct his business. With those sort of undertakings, we consider that we'll continue to monitor that situation, but really on the basis of those undertakings, we are not recommending formal enforcement action at the moment, but we'll again continue to engage with the applicant in that respect. It's worth pointing out that the government advice on traveller encampments, published back in 2015, actually suggests the nature of the travelling community is one where mixed-use sites are sort of, I won't say encouraged, but certainly the government advises that the nature of their lifestyle is one where consideration should be given to mixed-use sites which combine residential and commercial. I'm not, again, suggesting that's something that we can decide on this evening. The fact remains that there's a breach of condition. We are actively engaging with the applicants. The applicants are giving us advice, and we are prepared to allow that to happen. And again, I understand the frustrations of some people in respect to that, but to my mind, it doesn't presently warrant a formal action on our part. Just by way of a note again, this shows the ramped access into the site, which again, compared with previous iterations, is an improvement over what was what previously existed on site. That takes us to the third issue, which is the recent introduction of containers on site. 3 containers on site, 1, 2, and 3. Again, this is brought to our attention that they were brought onto site by a heavy crane, which again caused disruption on the A5. The local planning authority doesn't have authority or power over the A5, but the fact remains is that the containers have been deposited on site. Containers in themselves are an interesting planning conundrum as to whether or not they actually comprise development, because generally speaking, they rest on the land. So there's no operational development as such that's needed. And simply resting on the land, it could be argued, doesn't in itself involve development requiring planning permission. That said, where containers are used in connection with a use of a site, there may be an argument that there's a change of use of land requiring the need for planning permission. So suffice it to say, there's an arguable point on whether or not these require permission. But again, having regard to the original permission, these containers sit outside of the original application site. We're advised by the applicants that they are being used for the storage of personal belongings belonging to the traveller family, and as such they would be ancillary to the approved authorised site. That said, because they sit beyond the red line, there's an argument to say it's a breach of the original planning control and therefore it needs to be regularised. And again, it is a fairly recent event. We will be continuing to engage with the applicants to resolve that matter, which may result in an application for further retention. That said, I have visited the site to assess the impact of these containers on the wider landscape. And I have to say that they are, I will use the word, they are imperceptible from the public realm or not readily visible. Number of reasons why. Because the containers sit in an area of land that sits below the A5. The A5 frontage to the site is enclosed by a fence which was erected without the need for planning permission because it was permitted development, and that effectively screens the site from the A5. From Church Street, there's hedgerows and fencing again, which provides effective screening. And this is winter time where vegetation is fairly low, but even so, that vegetation affords reasonable screening of the site. And for those reasons, I do not judge there to be material planning harm that would warrant formal enforcement action against those containers at the present time. That said, we will continue to engage with the applicants to seek to regularise the matter, which may result in the submission of a formal application. Just looking at these photographs, again, these are views down the A5, and this fence has been installed. And it mirrors a fence that's sort of been installed, I think, in the adjoining properties just further up. This is a view across the A5. This is actually South Northamptonshire, as I understand it, and this is Clark's Garage. This is looking north to Weedon, and the site again is to the left-hand side. And this is approaching the site with the existing access. And again, from here, you do not see the containers. Again, looking, this is the lay-by on the Weedon side, looking south towards the application site. In terms of the wider landscape, the site sits lower than the skyline, sits lower than the A5. These are photographs that I've taken when I've been out on site, walking the canal conservation area. This is from the canal steps, looking across the cemetery towards the site. And again, this is from the eastern boundary of the cemetery, looking again towards the site, which sits below the skyline. You read it against the A5 boundary. This is again another view from the graveyard. Further views. This is from the public right-of-way. That's the closest public amenity area to the site. And I would accept that where you leave it from Church Street, you do get glimpses of the site. Those are filtered by a combination of the existing vegetation and screen fencing that's been erected. But I accept that there is some visibility of the site across that path. So this is what you would see. And again, this is at winter time. During the summer, vegetation is in full leaf. Visual mitigation is probably increased. Again, these are the views from the canal bridge. Looking again back towards the site over the sewage treatment plant towards the A5. And again, similar views. This is from the towpath, and again, it's the closest to the site you'll probably get. Between the towpath and the site, there's quite a steep embankment. It's fairly heavily planted, but you do get glimpses through towards the site at sort of roughly about 100 meters plus, maybe. And again, these are similar views. So this simply gives you a flavour of how the site sits in the landscape. But again, if members are thinking about formal enforcement action, etc., you have to assess it against the provision, the policies of your development plan. Turning to the last matter, which is external lighting installed without permission. Again, it's a fairly recent complaint. What I can say is that, again, the conditions of the original permission were complied with, in that external lighting details were submitted and agreed with the applicant prior to their occupation of the site. I accept, and I have no reason to dispute the allegations that new lighting has been brought onto the site. We continue to engage with the applicants on that and will, where necessary, seek to regularise it if it requires planning permission, or look to our environmental health colleagues if there is an issue with regard to highway safety, or indeed Highways England. But in planning terms, it currently is not sufficient grounds to warrant formal enforcement action. And having regard to the guidance that we are given by government, continued engagement with the applicants is preferable to jumping straight to formal enforcement action, I'm afraid. Other matters have been brought to our attention, including rubbish being burnt on site, etc. These have been brought again to the attention of our environmental health colleagues, and they will investigate those matters. So again, I have gone on a little bit there, but what I'm seeking to provide members with is an assurance that as officers, yes, we do share the frustrations of people with the system, and those who I won't say seek to abuse the system, but where breaches of planning control do occur, we need to engage because we act within a planning system that overall is seeking to secure suitable and proper development of land. And whilst breaches may cause frustration and upset, ultimately members must focus their minds on whether or not it's an appropriate use of the site and whether or not those breaches are unacceptable to such an extent in planning terms that it's expedient to pursue formal enforcement action. And even then, if you do decide that, applicants do have the right to exercise a right of appeal against such decisions if they so choose. So the site is subject to ongoing investigations. It's subject to ongoing dialogue with the applicants. To my mind, the service of a breach of condition notice has secured improvements to the access, but we need to continue to engage with other agencies to ensure that that access meets other technical sort of arrangements, but that falls outside the remit of the local planning authority. The applicants have sought to engage a planning consultant, and they are seeking to engage those issues of breaches of planning control. And certainly we will look to continue dialogue with the planning consultant to see how we can find a way forward in terms of addressing breaches of control. With that, Chairman, I'll hand back to yourself. But as I say, this is simply an update. It is not a conclusive document. It's simply providing members with a background of the work that officers have been undertaking in respect to the site and work we undertake in respect of many breaches of planning control across the district, operating within the system, whilst trying to understand the frustrations of those who don't work within the system, who perceive there to be simple abuses of the system. We have to work within the system, I'm afraid. Thanks, Chairman.
Thank you, Eamon. We have one speaker, Sue Butler. You have 3 minutes, Sue, when you're ready.
Good evening, Chairman. Good evening, committee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'd just like to point out a couple of things. And one is that the approval on this site was granted on the 5th of February 2016. So we're now 5 years down the line, with various breaches having taken place at this site. It's appreciated that the planning officer has provided some kind of update tonight as to, you know, what has been happening. However, as a local resident, it's quite apparent that things continue to be breached on site. And in fact, only last week, or was it the week before, another static unit was brought on site under the cover of darkness at 10 o'clock at night, lights flashing and everything. So it suggests to me that the site is being expanded before any so-called regularisation may be taking place. So from a response I had from Mr. Gillett, there is something here that says, it is usual if a breach is identified to give a reasonable time for a retrospective planning application to be submitted or for further works to be carried out to overcome this harm. I would question whether or not 5 years is a little too long to allow this to carry on. In my mind, 5 years is far too long. I think if I was to build a house in my garden or buy a field and build a house in it, enforcement would probably be down on me on like a ton of bricks. So for some of these items and things that are happening on this site, which is actually detrimental to the site adjacent to the canal conservation area, is really very disappointing. I do believe conditions are put in place to try and mitigate some of these problems from having happened, yet they still seem to have happened. And that again is disappointing. It's a shame that, you know, that it's taken this long and so many, well, lots of people writing in to sort of say, do you realise that this has happened? For it to come to a conversation such as this. I really think that, you know, 5 years and giving someone a reasonable time, 5 years is just too long. And I really would just, I'd really just like to ask that this enforcement actually does take place, because otherwise it's just going to be too late to do anything because too much time will have passed. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, local members, the first person to speak should be the person that's on the committee. Are you happy with that, Councillor Smith, or have you raised it different?
I shall defer to Councillor Brown, but reserve my right to speak, please, Chair.
So you're suggesting that Councillor Brown speaks first, Councillor Amos speaks second, and then you can speak when you like.
I don't believe Councillor Amos is speaking, but I could be wrong.
Okay. Right, Councillor Brown.
Thank you very much, Chairman. And may I just begin by saying thank you very much for all your years of service on this committee. I know it's you may have one more meeting at West Northamptonshire yet to come, but just wish to pass on my gratitude for your years of service on this committee. It is greatly appreciated. And on a similar note, I would like to pass on my thanks to officers for the hard work that they've put in compiling this report. We do have differences of opinion, but I salute the amount of work that's gone into this. There's a judgment call this evening for the committee to make, and that effectively is whether after 5 years, as Mrs. Butler pointed out, whether more of the same is an appropriate recommendation to accept, and whether 5 years of flouting of planning recommendations and the planning application granted back in 2016 may actually be a reasonable threshold for formal planning enforcement action. We're reminded in the paper that effective planning enforcement action is key to public confidence in the planning system. And I have to inform the committee tonight that public confidence in our local planning system hangs in the balance with this case. It is hugely controversial, not just in Wiedenbeck and Stone Iron churches, but also on the other side of the A5 in Nether Hayford, which of course is currently at South Northamptonshire. And as such, I've already raised this at West Northamptonshire with officers there. And I have to say, Mr. Chairman, they were surprised at the recommendations coming before the committee tonight. They were expecting the opposite recommendations, that we would move faster and with a heavier hand towards some form of formal planning enforcement. So I think the committee should bear that in mind as we move towards the unitary authority. Now, if we look back to 2016 and that original planning application, that application was so controversial that it raised concerns with Northamptonshire Police and Highways England. The vote on the night was extremely tight, and I believe that it was only as a result of the conditions imposed that this committee saw fit to grant the planning application back in 2016. Conditions which since then, over a 5-year period, have been flouted by the applicant. The entrance to the site, as the report stipulates, at paragraph 4.15 onwards, is still not approved by Highways. It's still not up to spec. I believe that the ramp cited earlier by the officer is not to Highways England specification. And anyone who knows that road, as I do as the local ward member, will be able to tell you that it's an extremely high-speed stretch of the A5. It's a section of the A5 where multiple serious accidents have occurred over recent years, causing multiple road closures because of those serious accidents. And the volume of traffic now entering and exiting the site may indeed present a very real and present danger to life. Mrs. Butler's already correctly identified the blockages of the highway by HGVs taking items on and off the site, and that should be taken extremely seriously by this committee. On a similar tone, when this committee saw fit to grant the original planning application in 2016, it was on the basis of one static and one caravan. That has since multiplied without permission to 6 statics and 2 caravans, a multiplication in traffic movements of at least 4-fold, if not more. And at the time of the original planning application, the police raised concerns that the permitted inhabitation of the site would be exceeded. Since that point, local members have seen emails between the applicant and the previous monitoring officer of this council, whereby the applicant expressed his intention to move more families onto the site. I believe very firmly, Mr. Chairman, that that is what is happening here. Local eyewitness testimony states that the residents of the site are not in keeping with a family unit. And I believe that there was a flagrant attempt by the applicant to game the planning system and string things out for time. We're now 5 years in. When I last spoke at this committee, Mr. Chairman, it was about an issue of enforcement where this authority had been time barred under statute from taking further action in one case. I believe on the night I may have slightly overstepped the mark in my passions, and I apologise for any offence that I caused. But we all get very passionate about these things. They matter to our residents. They matter more widely in the sense that planning law must be seen to be upheld. Justice must be seen to be done within the planning system. The report identifies at least 4 separate breaches, 5 years of non-compliance by the applicant. We're told tonight that I wasn't quite clear on the language from the officer, whether the applicant has either engaged a planning consultant or intends to engage a planning consultant. However, whichever it may be, we were told very similar, if not exactly the same, 2 years ago, in May of 2019. No application has since been forthcoming. And I believe that this is the same pattern of behaviour in trying to run out the clock, game the system, and continue with a pattern of unauthorised development in multiple fashions across the site. And we've seen ample evidence of it tonight in the officer's report. I would also add, Mr. Chairman, that in terms of impact upon the visual amenity of the area, I don't quite think that the photos shown to the committee give a full impression. I don't doubt for a moment that officers went to best endeavours to capture the reality on the site, but I can inform the committee that with local knowledge, there are better angles to capture the reality of the site, particularly from the public right-of-way, known locally as the track. That site is highly visible from areas of there. It's a natural beauty spot. It's used widely by dog walkers and people out for leisure walks. And this site is having a very visible impact. Now, I won't go on for too much longer, Mr. Chairman, because I know that you've been at it all night. I would just say to the committee that This situation reminds me in a funny way of a trip I took to the theatre several years ago. I went to see The Tempest at the Royal Theatre with my wife, and The Tempest concludes with a very powerful soliloquy by the main character Prospero. But unfortunately, on the night, the actor playing Prospero fluffed the vital last line, and the audience went home feeling slightly cheated, slightly deflated. And that failure in delivering the last line overshadowed all the good that had gone before. Now tonight, Mr. Chairman, DDC is delivering our closing soliloquy. We're giving our last line. This is our final curtain. And I would urge the committee to provide local residents with the justice and the common sense that they so desire. That way, we can ensure that Daventry District Council exits stage right to applause, giving residents what they need. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Amos, do you wish to speak?
Thank you, Chairman. No, I don't think I can add any more to what my ward councillor has already said. Thank you.
Okay, my pleasure. Councillor Smith, do you wish to speak now or later?
I shall hold off for a moment because I see Councillor Ritchie would like to speak.
Okay, I've got Councillor Ritchie to speak, then I'm going to the planning officer to respond to some of the comments made. Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you, Chair. Look, can I start by congratulating Councillor Brown on quite a Shakespearean performance. The problem is that Shakespeare was about fiction. This is actually dealing with people here. But Councillor Brown has referred to visual amenity. Now, I didn't actually click with this report in the papers for tonight's meeting. I didn't know where this place was. It's been referred to as a place where the views for dog walkers are affected. Well, look, over the past 5-10 years, I walk along the canal from Nether Hayford to Weedon at least once a month. And, you know, until this report came to this committee, I wasn't even aware that this site existed. It certainly hasn't spoiled my enjoyment of that particular bit of countryside. Now, my understanding is that tonight we're simply getting a report. We are not tonight in a position in which we are going to direct the officers to do one thing or another. We're receiving a report, and you know, clearly we give feedback to the report that we have received. But it strikes me that our officers have been behaving with incredible patience and tact with a difficult decision. It's clear that in a situation like this, there is a clash of cultures, there is a clash of lifestyles, and wherever that happens, of course, you're going to get people who are going to be upset, and it doesn't mean that wrong has not been done. So I hope that at least tonight, we as a committee will be able to give on this issue what is effectively a vote of thanks and confidence to the way in which officers have handled it. Now, of course, if we don't take action when people don't comply with decisions of this committee, then it would mean we've been wasting our time, all these long evenings that we put into taking decisions if nobody is prepared to take any notice of them or to enforce them. But I wonder if there's a way, it suggests that our officers think of a way forwards where it is not, you know, a situation in which we give the impression that no action will ever be taken. You know, there have got to be lines that are drawn. But I wonder if you could do these with sort of sense and tact. And for the moment, say to our officers that, look, these are difficult situations. We know that people will have strong views about them, but we think that so far, this has been handled correctly. Yes, the more that we see that the use of the site is deviating from whatever was intended with the original planning decisions. Yeah, look, there have got to be points at which is, look, we can't go further than that, or we will take action. But for the moment, I hope that we can say that, look, we are satisfied. We are more than that. We thank the officers for having handled it in the way that they have done.
Thank you. I'm going back to Eamon now. You had your hand up. Obviously, you wanted to make some comments, I would think.
Yeah, thanks, Chairman. It's just with respect to the time frames that the members have been advised of tonight. Yes, it's true, planning permission was given in 2016. Occupation of the site did not take place until 2019 or thereabouts, when we received complaints that there was a caravan on site.
Has something happened to your?
No, I thought I'd heard somebody come back.
All right.
The fact is the site has not been occupied since 2016 is the point I'm trying to make. The complaints about occupation were sometime after that time. So it would be from that date that the breach and the timing would be taken, rather than from the date that permission was granted, is what I would be saying. But yeah, I'm not seeking, as I say, to condone actions of people on the site, but equally we have to act within the system. And effective enforcement is not just about taking enforcement action. It's about securing regularization and compliance, and ultimately an acceptable use or development of land. So it's not simply all about a big hammer to hammer people with. It's about negotiation and engagement and securing an acceptable outcome. Thanks, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Irving Swift.
Yes, as I have a lot of gypsy and traveller site in my division.
Councillor Irving Swift, we'll use the word, perhaps gypsy is a common, but I would prefer use the word traveller. All right?
Well, it's very difficult because in my part of the world, they don't like to use settle and things. So depending with which group of traveller you speak, they have different way of liking to be addressed. So if you prefer, I will use travellers. But my part of the world, they don't like it. So
I accept that.
It's very, very difficult depending which group you are addressing. And so I know how sensitive those issues. And I feel I have a say that there is not a right way to do the wrong thing. And the poor officers are trying to do the right thing, but for the wrong outcome. And that is where we are. We are in a dilemma. The law doesn't allow an officer to be expedient, and the public, the settled population, look with despair when the rule do not seem to apply for certain communities. I say that very passionately because we know we apply condition, and in some it's about one family, and we know in certain site there is no family because they are not travelers. They are from other ethnic people who live on the site. So could I ask the officer, because I think the officer did a very comprehensive report tonight, and I think everybody is aware how frustrating the public is and how frustrating we are. But what happened, because the planning permission was for one family, and it has been, seems that with a number of proliferation, it seems to be more than one family. So how can we put, my concern is that they are not doing what they are supposed to do, and we are always in the realm of catching up, and that is what upset more than anything everyone. So how could we do the right thing without putting our officer in danger of having an enforcement that is not feasible? And that I do not have an answer. So I don't know what to do tonight, but I would thank the officer for their clarity, because they all, I think the public can understand where they are at, and also can share the frustration we have as us on planning committee. I feel very frustrated tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Eamon, I should think you wish to answer certainly a few of the earlier ones of that.
Again, coming back to Councillor Brown's point, I failed to mention, I have spoken to the planning consultant that has been engaged to deal with the residential issues on the site, and following this meeting I will indicate to them obviously the need to address other breaches. That will be an ongoing conversation, but I can confirm they have engaged a planning consultant. In respect of the family on site, I mean, I've been to the site on a number of occasions. I've sat in the day room. I've witnessed children playing on the green area outside. I've seen and spoken to the mother on site. I have not seen multiple families on site. If I'm going to be blunt about it, they're a big family and they all can't fit in one mobile home. There are other issues that I cannot go into, but I am satisfied that in the evidence that I've seen, it's a large traveller family, single family. There may be occasional visits by others during the day, etc. I'm not on site to monitor the site 24 hours a day, but I have been to the site on a number of occasions, and there's nothing that comes to, certainly to my mind, that says there's more than one family living on the site presently. Thanks, Chairman.
Thank you, Eamon. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. Let's not, I know it's late, so I'll be as quick as I can. We gave planning for a static van, a touring van, and a day room, and a stipulated size of hard standing. Don't get confused with this family. That's not mentioned on the planning application. Yeah, clearly somebody's going to be living there, and by what we gave, one would expect it would be one family, but it was not what was in the permission given. The applicant is not the person, or not the applicant. The applicant is not the person who's living there. Whether that makes any difference, but just for your information. I know the site very well. Ken, I appreciate you may not have seen the site from the canal, but that's not really relevant. You can see it if you're looking. But what we've got here is 5 years of talking about it. And I'm sorry, Eamon, but people have been living on the site prior to 2019. I live in Weedon. I'm one of those dog walkers, Ken. I see this every day. It's a shame the parish council couldn't speak this evening. They did send a representation to all members. I hope you managed to read that. The applicant has had sufficient time to make a retrospective application, has chosen not to. And yes, we can engage, and if there's a planning consultant been appointed by the applicant, fine. But we should enter into enforcement action. We could choose to stop that enforcement action, but we need to cajole. We need to push this on. because there's far too many people who see what's going on, and somebody will be killed on the A5 because of the traffic movements in and out of that site. The traffic flow, or whatever the data provided at the point when we had the application, it was based around one static van, and you would expect, I guess, 4 or 5 people maybe to live in that. I don't know. I've never been in one. But we've got a lot more traffic movements there. The latest static van to arrive on site in the past month or so was actually craned in under the cover of darkness. I mean, what could have happened? If we don't do something and somebody is killed, we are all culpable. We need to take action. It's as simple as that. The time is to act. And if we don't, well, what happens next? And if we take action, if it goes all the way and it goes to appeal, then fine. But it's very clear, as Adam put far more eloquently than I can ever speak. We had the application before us in 2016. It was a close decision, and it went through fine. I don't have a problem with that. So in enforcement, we can very clearly lay out what we expect the applicant to do, which is to put the site back to what we gave the permission for, which was a touring van, should they decide to have one. They don't have to have a touring van, by the way, and the hard standing and the day room, of course, which is there. It's not unreasonable. That's what they applied for, and that's what we gave the permission for. They provided us with the traffic movements, which we based our decision on. So we were happy that if Highways England's specifications were adhered to, that it would be safe. We're not dealing with that same thing now. So the time is now to take enforcement action, and at any point we can then decide if things are going the right way, then fine, we can stop them. So I'm sorry, officers, I have every respect for you, but I think on this occasion, we do need to move forward with enforcement. 5 years is sufficient time to have brought forward a retrospective planning application, or for the conditions of which very few have been discharged to be discharged.
Thank you. I'm going to say something as chairman now, which I don't usually get involved in too much, but I must do. I'm not taking sides because I don't mind which side happens what. But what I do know is, if you take enforcement action on an applicant, they can appeal, which clearly they will do. Now, if they appeal, even somebody such as me, and I'm not a planner, knows I can hang that appeal out for an awful long time. Certainly, probably up to a couple of years. If the council is not successful and the applicant is successful at that appeal, and I'm not saying they would be, they will get significant costs against us for not considering what the government tell us to do. In other words, listen to them and make a way forward. Now, I'm not saying you approve everything. You may lose everything. You may win everything, but don't go and cost the council money. Do it the officer's way, but give them a kick a bit to get on with it. In other words, if I was proposing it, probably say, well, okay, they've got a planning person now. So can we say to you, as a committee, we expect you to engage with that planning person and get a result out of them and get back to this committee. Because of local public opinion, we want you back here within 6 months with an answer, with a resolution to all the problems that you've said. Now, surely, members, that's a better way of you securing something local than losing money, losing the system, and possibly losing everything. I'm sorry to jump in. I don't very often jump in, but I have. Councillor James came up next, followed by Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, about 3-4 years ago, I went to a couple of meetings deputising for Councillor Warren of the County Travellers Unit. And one of the things which I learned from them was you achieve far more by pragmatism than you do by force. And that is true, and it works. Now, I know this site. I know what's been going on there. I know what local people local to the area say about it, and I understand their concerns. And I was pretty fired up when it came to this item here. But having listened to the area planning officer who did an analysis of all 4 or 5 or whatever it is of these issues here, it begins to make sense, bearing in mind that there is an ongoing dialogue to adopt the pragmatic route. And we've just heard the chairman suggest maybe putting a time limit on some course of action or a report, a progress report. I would make it a little bit longer than 6 months that was suggested. But I do think perhaps after listening to the area planning officer's analysis of it and listening to our own chairman, the chairman of this committee, of his assessment of the situation and the possible embarrassments we may cause through being officious, let alone the costs involved, it would be better to adopt a pragmatic approach to this and let the planning officer carry on with an ongoing dialogue to see if we can come up with some solution to the issues involved. If you wish to put a time limit on that with the report back, that'll be up to members of the committee. But I think that is the best way forward on this occasion. I really do. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. I wasn't expecting to speak again. I don't know whether everybody heard what Councillor Brown said, but he referenced a correspondence from our previous monitoring officer to Northamptonshire Police. And in that correspondence, it references the intention of the applicant to bring more people onto, or more families onto the site in the coming years. This came to light quite recently, and I'm most uncomfortable with this. Why were members not informed of this? I don't understand. I'm really uncomfortable. And this isn't the first time I've been uncomfortable with matters that I've discovered this week. I've said what I've said. I know what I think should happen. As I say, enforcement action can be started. The dialogue, then if it's going the right way, it can be stopped. But there's a much bigger picture opening up here, and it's a sad picture in such a late day for DDC.
Thank you. Councillor Irving-Swift.
Yes, I listened to what you say, and I listened to Councillor Smith and Councillor Brown. So I think we can go round and round and round. Now the officers say that they want to engage, and I don't have any problem with engagement, but we have to engage, but also show teeth. And because if we don't show teeth, it can carry on longer. So my proposal will be that with what you said, that we give the planning officer a time limit, a time frame to engage. And if in the next six months seems a long way, but let's say we have unitary and so on. Let's say by September will be 6 months. By the end of the summer, the applicant come, and if nothing is in front of us, we go with enforcement at that time. I think that will maybe the way forward. And also, we should make aware maybe that the condition is for one family, and if other family move in the site, we can put an injunction, because that is what Kettering County Council, you can put an injunction. What I don't understand is why we don't stop more static caravan to go on the site. I can tell you, because in my part of the world, we have, and that is always the same, the traveler site are always on boundaries, because it's to your authority and it's on the other side of my boundary. And Kettering Borough Council did 2 injunctions, so no more caravan. So my proposal is to go with a 6 months, but could we please ask the officer if the parish or somebody says that a caravan is moving on site, we have a lawyer and we put an injunction for no more caravan on site. Is that possible? Because I know other councils have done it. And that will be a way forward. The applicant can put a regularization in 6 months, but we will make sure that the member of the public will see the site maybe become bigger, or if it's we have an injunction, if the site become bigger in the meantime. Is that a possibility? Thank you.
I will ask officers. Eamon, is that a possibility that Councillor Irving Swift is talking about?
I'm not a lawyer, Chairman. Injunctions are legal tools that can be used. I've made reference to it in the report. If that's something that members want officers to explore, then I'm happy to explore that with your legal services in terms of injunction. You can use them against apprehended breaches of planning control, I think, but there are quite strict sort of criteria for doing them. They're not used very frequently, and certainly I've not been involved with one, but I'm quite happy if members want us to explore all options open to them, including injunctions, then to sit down with our legal team and do that. Equally,
and the first part, Eamon, is it possible that this committee could say to you, okay, Eamon, go away. Now they've got a planning consultant, talk with them, get a move on, and get a report back within 6 months on all the issues that have been raised, and you can actually express the feeling of the committee that the report.
You're the planning committee chairman. I'm merely an officer of the council. If the planning committee
says that, you can do it.
Well, if the planning committee instructs me to say we want to report back here in 6 months, updating you, and these are the issues we want you to address, then that's what you're instructing the officers to do. Clearly, officers will have to take that on board and investigate those options for you. Again, I'm a planning officer. I have to give you the best planning advice I can. I'm not guaranteeing you that I will be coming back with enforcement notices coming out my ears, but if enforcement notices is the way forward, the expedient way forward, then that could all be what I'm recommending. Equally, in that 6 months, you could have an application before planning committee that members will consider and deal with. The point is, you should be seen to be engaging with the applicant and acting in a proportionate manner. That's the expectation and the guidance set out for enforcement. It's not simply to go straight to the enforcement matter. And yeah, I do come back to the issue of the time limits. The permission was given in 2016. Unless there's evidence before us of earlier occupation, my understanding of the complaints about occupation pursuant to the permission was more recently than that, and certainly not as early as 2016.
Thank you. And going back to speakers now. Wait a minute.
Sorry, Sir Chairman, could I make a proposal? If I make a proposal.
Chairman, may I raise a point of order, please?
You can raise a point of order.
Thank you. On a point of law, this council will cease to exist on the 31st of March. Therefore, any proposal to bring back a recommendation or anything else before this committee is inactionable, in my view. There will be a Daventry Area Planning Committee of West Northamptonshire Council, but policy and the approach to enforcement matters is likely to be different under West Northamptonshire Council.
Whilst that may be so, we can still ask for a report to be made to come back to that committee, and that committee can consider it under what rules they have, be they different from what we have now.
Chairman, if I may come in on that point, I think what I'm hearing is that if committee have a specific wish that officers act in a certain way, then I can certainly make sure that that's any commitment given by officers of Daventry District Council to Daventry District Council's Planning Committee is then passed on to West Northamptonshire Council.
Yeah.
And my expectation is that any commitment given will be honoured by West Northamptonshire Council. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. Our legal man.
Yes, to be honest, I appreciate it's late. So without going into the technicalities of it all, I just agree with Tony that there are transitional provisions in place to carry forward matters from councils.
Thank you. So going back to you, Councillor Irving Swift, do you want to complete the proposition then?
Yes, what I would like, and maybe our legal counsel could do, is that we propose that if that a planning application, a complete planning application with all the breaches clear, come back in front of committee in the next 6 months, before the 6 months, and we can name the date, and also say that that committee decide that if any new static caravan go on the site via crate or whatever, as the council can take an injunction against it. Thank you.
That wasn't the suggestion that I was making, Councillor Irving Swift, but does anybody want to second that proposal?
Chairman, sorry, just before we seek a seconder for that, I'd just like to take a view of our legal officer. Can we be clear that we would seek an injunction based on that, or is it something that perhaps we need to commit to exploring as opposed to moving straight to an injunction?
Thank you, Tony. Chairman, through you. In relation to this, obviously, I completely stand behind what the planning officers said, and the guidance is clear that it needs to be proportionate and engagement, and for the reasons without repeating them all. So I would suggest that it would make sense to bring a report back to the future council. And in terms of an injunction at this stage, I don't think it would be proportionate on the basis that time has gone by. I appreciate that. But as the officer has clearly said, and he's spoken to the planning agent, there is now a planning agent involved. I would suggest that you could ask for a report to be back in the shorter period in relation to the propositions, so that if the officers can consider the expediency of whether or not an injunction may be appropriate at a shorter period, if they have a strong belief that it doesn't appear that an application will be coming forward, the situation is deteriorating, etc. And that's something that the officer would do in their general approach to this matter anyway. But I think it would be a step too far on the basis of the current situation to seek to order an injunction at this stage.
Thank you. Do you want to alter your wording?
Yes, that is not what I said.
Hang on a minute, Councillor Irving Swift. Do you want to alter it to, instead of getting the planning application for each one, a report, and then continue with your wording?
So may I say, the thing is, because I was involved in an injunction with catering, so I know what, I'm not a lawyer nor a planner, but as I said, I'm dangerous enough because I know too much for my own good. But for an injunction, what I propose that we carry on, and our planning officer was right. He engaged with what it is in front of us, but we stop any more new static caravan coming on the site. And that you need to use an injunction, because when they are in, you are dealing with a retrospective. We are not difficult. We said we have to regularize the size as it is now, and no more new caravan. If it's a new caravan, we will, because if you do not do the injunction before they move on the site, you are on regularization. And that I'm certain of what I said. So basically, the injunction is just to make sure that the size do not become bigger. But otherwise, the officer can do the job with the, and if they want more caravans, they can put that on their planning application. But the planning committee can have a good planning application in front of us. So basically, it's maybe 3 months or 4 months, as you say, a bit shorter, but with a caveat that no more static caravan goes on the site when discussions are brought forward. Thank you.
Is that reasonable, Mr. Lawyer?
Well, to be honest, I've given my advice on the basis that I would suggest that a further shorter report would be required in that regard, because of the fact that I think it's unreasonable without having discussions with the planning agent to determine what their intention is. It may well be that on the basis that discussions are then engaged and they say, yes, this is our intention, so a planning application is put in.
So,
you know, that would be my view, that I think it is disproportionate at this stage to go to that levels, but it's a matter for you, and I'm happy for either Tony or Eamon to come back on that point as to how you would normally look to seek committee resolution on enforcement matters of that nature.
So if we brought the 6 months down to 4 months, would that be unreasonable, or would you consider that reasonable?
Personally, I would consider it reasonable. I mean, you know, in all due respect, you know, this is a public forum committee. They will be well aware of the situation, both through Eamon and through this committee meeting, as to the view of the council, and it is not something that they will deem lightly not to start taking measures to rectify or regulate the position, I would suggest. So I don't think it's unreasonable to say 4 months to bring a report back, even if it is on the basis that the application has been submitted, but there's still some matters to deal with, etc. But it would be reasonable then to give you, as the council, an update in regards to the position on it, without feeling that it was going on without any review on the situation at that particular development.
Thank you. Councillor Irving-Swift, do you want to make that 4 months review on whatever it is on everything, yeah, or not?
I am quite happy with the 4 months, but I maintain my position that is it's not unreasonable to say that when the officer is seeking a dialogue, a constructive dialogue, no more static caravan go on the site. I don't think it's unreasonable. It will bring everybody to a good position, that the settled population will say, yes, it's fine, nothing more happen, and the traveling community has a time to pause for thought and to regularize the situation. What I don't understand is what is so difficult to say no more caravan on the site. But that is the only way you can do it within an injunction. And that I am pretty sure about it, because we had an injunction in Kettering, and it was, you have to do it before they pass the line. As soon as they are in the site, it's gone. That is what I know, and I cannot say anything. So I live in other, and if nobody wants to support me, it fell, but that is my position. And unfortunately, when a French digs their heels in, I am not going to move off that position at the moment. Thank you.
if you were an applicant and you were having an injunction served on you before you were having discussions about everything else, how would you feel? What
No,
would you do? I know what I'd do.
No, but may I say, I don't say that you have an injunction. We put the injunction only if under darkness and so on, they move a new caravan on. That's all what I said. That is my problem. For the site to stay the site it is. That's
Okay,
all. And
I've got your proposal. So you're proposing 4 months for the officers to try and sort it all out, but also you want an injunction served, especially to cover what you've just said. If they move another vehicle on.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's a threat. Okay. Do you have a seconder for that?
Councillor Smith, Chairman.
Sorry?
Councillor Smith, Chairman.
Councillor Smith, yes. You wish to second it, Councillor Smith?
I do, but I'd like to amend the timings to align the timings so when the enforcement notice went in reference the highways with the breach of condition went in on the 28th of August. So that takes us more or less to the end of, does that take us into June? So surely we should try and align those two together because it will show whether there's intention.
So what are you saying?
People may not agree, but this is, yeah, whatever. Yes, I stand by what Councillor Erving-Swift would like to do.
Okay, so you second it. Right, yes. Next speaker is Councillor Parker.
Yeah, I think things have moved on a bit. I mean, as in my previous address on the previous application, I'm just looking for things to be as the conditions said, which I don't find unreasonable, quite honestly, because that's what this committee actually passed. I'm not sure whether it was 2015 or 16. If Eamon says it's 2016 and whatever, it's fine by me. All I can see is 4 technical breaches. The access is still not approved, although they were given 10 months from August 20. So I think that's where Councillor Smith's coming from on his date of the end of June to align the two together. Number of vehicles is not where it should be. Number of dwellings most certainly isn't. There's a HGV on site where it's not allowed, and it's also not in their gift to bring an HGV on site from over the road from a garage. I really don't see this 3 months at all. I would align with what Councillor Smith's saying. It's not strange, is it strange or not, that they've appointed somebody now to actually take it forward? It might be just a coincidence, that's all I can say. But I would agree with Councillor Smith, the date should be aligned. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Parker. But if you do what you're suggesting, the applicant can straight away appeal and it'll take another 2 years. At least if you get an agreement of this committee to get the officers to get it back a report within the time limit, you're getting something you can work on straight away, which has been through both sides. But
that's why I said I would agree with Councillor Smith on aligning the time frame, which is I think what Councillor Cecile Erving-Swift has said as well. I don't see anything wrong in that. If you've appointed an agent, how long does it take? I mean, can we move at pace for a change on these sorts of things?
But Councillor Parker, let's say we move at pace. Tomorrow, they've got to do everything, and he's told the other side he can appeal straight away against it, and he has another time limit on it, which will carry way over 4 months. Anyway, let's carry on. The next speaker is is
Councillor Ritchie, Chairman.
Councillor Ritchie.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Look, I'm not fussed as to whether we're talking about 4 months or 6 months or what the period is. I'm just slightly concerned about the nature of the decision that we actually take tonight. I mean, at one stage, Councillor Irving Swift was saying that we should ask the officers to engage. Well, that's exactly what the officers have been doing. They have been engaging. I think, though, it would be good if this committee were in a position to give the officers not a stick, perhaps a lever, that in the sense of a decision that can be communicated to these people to say that, look, the committee or its successor will want a report by this stage, and it is on their agenda that there are issues on which action will be initiated unless there is movement, but not actually that ties us to doing anything, and that not anything that goes beyond what is reasonable. I think that if we are going to call for action, and we by this stage being whoever we becomes, but if there is going to be action, I mean, let it be on things where we feel there is not on the whole range of all the of all the conditions that have not been met, but on things that actually really matter. If there is somebody living on the site from a different family, it's wrong, but who actually suffers? If there's a heavy goods vehicle from across the road that comes and parks on the site, well, again, it's wrong. I mean, the thing that is wrong is that what we asked for has not been delivered, but nobody's actually going to suffer very much. There may be things that, like having the containers on the site, where the physical means of putting the containers there and taking them away again might constitute a risk. Where yes, that there could be, there could be an argument. But rather than fighting on absolutely everything, is there not a way that we can tell the officers, look, they can actually go and say, let's try and work this out. Let's try and work a way forwards. I'm desperate that we can work a way forwards, because if not, that committee is going to come down on you on this particular action. I just wonder if there's a different way that we effectively up a level of threat, but at the same time, we continue in a sort of civilized way to try to reach a resolution of some of these issues.
Thank you, Councillor Ritchie. Our council legal man has his hand up. I'm going to go to a vote shortly, but you wish to say something, sir? Council legal?
Apologies, that was, I think, me just forgetting to take it down.
To speak?
Sorry.
Oh, right. Okay.
Sorry.
Right. My internet is unstable. Can you hear me? At least I hope you can. Right. Councillor Ritchie asked a question. Can an officer answer that? Can you answer that, Eamon?
Remove the question, Councillor Ritchie. I mean, what I've taken from tonight's debate, I mean, at the end of the day, officers are doing their job, right? Whether you like the way we do our job or you don't like the way we do our job, we're doing our job. We're trying to engage with the people. We brought this report to you tonight. Clearly, it's got stuff out in the open. People have aired their issues, etc. Which, if I may summarise, are ongoing concerns about highway safety and the need to fully comply with the breach of condition, but also the need to secure a 278 agreement with Highways England. So to my mind, that is clear sort of guidance from members that I need to expedite with Highways England their engagement in the site, which, to be frank, I think they just sat in their ivory tower and simply spouted out advice without positively engaging, and that may well be resources, etc. But I will certainly be looking to engage with Highways England and saying, members have a serious concern about ongoing highway safety. They've issued a breach of condition notice, so they've gone as far as they can they would expect Highways England to do their bit. What enforcement action that results in from Highways England against the occupants of the site, I don't know. It's not within my remit. But certainly we will continue that conversation. As regards the numbers of units on site and the containers, I will be speaking with the planning consultant tomorrow to obviously, again, air members' concerns that they want the situation regularised. Their ideal scenario would be to go back to 1 unit, but in the absence of any application forthcoming, they will consider all tools open to them, including service of an injunction notice. I'm not suggesting that we will, because I'm not sufficiently expert on serving injunctions, but certainly members have voiced their concerns sufficient for me to be able to communicate to the planning agent what those concerns are. So as officers, we will continue to explore what options along the spectrum of enforcement, from taking no action to full enforcement action. That's what we do. So we will continue to do that. Then we will obviously, in the absence of any applications, come back to you members or whatever future format it takes with an update on where we're at. But we're not going to go much further than that this evening, I'm afraid.
Oh, okay. Right, Councillor Irving Swift, you made a proposal. That proposal still stands. It's been seconded. We all know what the proposal is. Those in
Can you repeat
favour.
it?
Sorry?
I'm not sure that we all do know what the proposal is.
Well, Councillor Irving Swift, can you say your proposal in 2 sentences?
Yes. First, that officer will engage up to, so we need to say the date. So if it's 4 months from now, or is it at the end of June? So the officer need to have a mandate to bring back in front of committee the report, how they have progressed with so that, and that the committee made a clear stick that they will consider an injunction or the possibility of an injunction if new static caravan come on site. So it's a very open and it's a very plain.
Okay, you've had your 2 sentences.
Yeah, thank you.
Right, that's been.
Is that clear?
Yeah, right, that's been seconded. All those in favour, over to Marina. Marina, can you do the count, please?
Councillor Chandler.
4.
Councillor Cribbin.
4.
Councillor Dabbs.
4.
Councillor Frost.
4.
Councillor Harris.
I'm 4, but clarification, is it end of June or is it 4 months? Because they are 2 different things.
It's 4 months in the proposal.
Then 4 months, I'm 4. Thank you.
Councillor Irving Swift.
4.
Councillor James.
4.
Councillor Matton.
4.
Councillor Parker.
4.
Councillor Ritchie.
4.
Councillor Smith.
4.
Councillor Wesley.
4.
Unanimous, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, committee. It was a good debate. Some quite a few things have been learnt. I'm sure we're all falling to sleep, but it was great. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the planning committee. Not only includes this one, it concludes all of Daventry's planning committees. But we'll see